fifth model, in fact, born in the 60s. It's the Harrier jump jet, the world's first vertical takeoff fighter plane. After 25 years in frontline action, this is still one of the best battle planes in the business. The Harrier can do just about anything you want. But how does it work? Like this.
The Harrier has captured the public's imagination. It's earned its reputation, with the likes of the Spitfire, as a great British fighter. Thanks to its versatility and its amazing aerobatic powers, the Harrier is a potent war machine. It can hover, pirouette and land in the tightest of circumstances. The arrival of this amazing aircraft was the culmination of 20 years aviation development. So how did they do that? In the post-war years, a quest was launched for a plane to take off and land vertically. A variety of weird and wonderful aircraft were tested. The most bizarre was the flying bedstead, which looked like something from those magnificent men in their flying machines, but did manage a vertical takeoff. In fact, the flying bedstead was the inspiration behind the Rolls-Royce Pegasus engine, designed for the early Harrier and successfully tested on a remote-controlled model.
By 1960, a prototype of the Hawker Harrier made its first tentative appearance. A few months later, it achieved its first proper hover on the end of a line. In 1963, confidence was running high and the Harrier was displayed at the Paris International Air Show. Unfortunately, in front of the world's press and its main European competitors, the Harrier came to earth with an undignified thud. But this was to prove only a temporary setback, and the Harrier entered active service in 1969 as the first vertical takeoff aircraft in the West. 25 years on, the modern Mark II Harrier is a very different aeroplane. A new engine combined with computer technology and state-of-the-art weapon systems have produced a fearsome, high-tech fighting machine. But the concept of vertical takeoff and landing remain the same. So how do they do that?
That capability is possible due to the large engine providing 21,500 pounds of thrust and 4 rotatable nozzles that are connected to that engine. Those nozzles are controlled by this nozzle lever here, and by moving the nozzle lever aft, we can pull the nozzles down to point vertically down, thereby allowing us to decelerate in flight and therefore hover.
So, during conventional flight, the nozzles are directed backwards to produce forward thrust. They're then rotated during takeoff or landing to produce downward thrust. This replaces the aerodynamic lift normally produced by the wing and allows the Harrier to hover gently to the ground.
You must remember, in a conventional aeroplane, to decelerate below a certain speed will cause the aeroplane to stall and therefore fall out the sky. The Harrier, by virtue of its nozzles, can decelerate through that speed and fly down to 0 forward speed, thus hovering.
In addition to providing lift for takeoff and landing, the nozzles can also help the pilot in a combat situation. How? Well, during air-to-air dogfights with enemy aircraft, the nozzles can be used to slam the brakes on. In a maneuver known as vectoring, the nozzle thrust is suddenly directed downwards with immediate effect. The Harrier pilot now has a superior position with the enemy aircraft firmly in his sights. As well as vertical takeoffs, the nozzles are used for short takeoffs, which are more fuel efficient, but no less spectacular.
The Harrier's first real test in a combat zone came during the 1982 Falklands War. With Argentinian forces occupying the other end of the world, a British task force set sail for the South Atlantic. But how could the Harriers help?
Basically, the Harrier was the only aeroplane that we as a nation had that could get down to participate in the Falklands. An aeroplane capable of landing on either a small aircraft carrier, as we had, or indeed on the container ships that we used to get the reinforcement aircraft down to the Falklands.
Once with the task force, the Harriers took on the job of ground support, flying daily attacks on enemy positions. As they approached the islands, enemy fire awaited them, as did Argentinian cameras to capture the action. But BBC cameras were there to welcome them back.
I'm not allowed to say how many planes joined the raid, but I counted them all out, and I counted them all back.
There were no losses and only minimal damage. It had been a truly successful mission.
The next time a Harrier flew in anger was during the Gulf War of 1991, but by then it had undergone some fundamental changes. Here at RAF Dunsfold, where British Aerospace assembled the aircraft, the Mark II Harrier emerged with an upgraded engine and some additional computerized features. What was already very good had been made even better, but how? Inside the cockpit, the pilot can monitor his speed and heading on a computer display in front of him with a map reference to double-check. Special night flight goggles and an infrared camera mounted in the nose cone allow him to fly accurately and effectively day or night, skimming the ground at treetop level. The weapons system too has been updated. The Harrier pilot now carries a lethal cocktail of new missiles and bombs. But it's the unique combination of high technology and design genius that makes the Harrier such a joy to fly.
This is a great aeroplane. The capabilities that we've got, the things we can do with it, it's just fun. It's just more fun than any other airplane I've ever flown. Normally, when you've flown and got a little bit of experience, to come back and land the airplane is the end of the sortie, and it's fairly mundane. To come back and land this airplane is a thrill every time. We can land so many different ways, and we can do so many different things with the airplane, that I think every Harrier pilot loves it.
It's a great invention. I can't wait for the car version. Whiz over those traffic jams. It'll be wonderful.